Hi there, my name is Mallory and this is I Wonder About Things. Welcome and thank you so much for listening to I Wonder About Things. Have you ever wondered why we say cheese when we are posing for a picture or why Wednesday Addams is named after a day? You're not the only one. I have, and I want answers. In I Wonder About Things, I will answer all the questions that have been on my mind for the past 30 years. Even the most insignificant ones and the weirdest ones, you'll see. In case you missed last week's episode, I tried to find out more about the origins of pink and blue as gender colors. And if you haven't listened to it yet, you can still listen to the episode on your favorite platform. And it's on YouTube too, so just type I Wonder About Things podcast and you'll find the channel. Today's episode is dedicated to one of my favorite TV shows, The Walking Dead. And yes, the show is back on Sunday, and I'm both, excited and sad because they are the very last episodes. I started watching The Walking Dead when it was first aired. I think it was late 2010. And I have always been interested in the zombie apocalypse, not only in gory zombies with their awful bloody faces, but also, in the survival instinct of people. How people react, how people interact and organize and survive in such situations. And you see what I mean. The Walking Dead was just the perfect show and I quickly became a huge fan. I'm just gonna stop there for a second and tell you that if you haven't seen The Walking Dead yet or the spin-off Tales of the Walking Dead, but want to, please don't listen to this episode because I'm going to talk about the whole show and give major spoilers. You've been warned. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's go! Like I said earlier, I became really invested in The Walking Dead, and to give you an example, when my favorite character died, I literally went through the different stages of grief, and I'm serious about it. And I did a little warning at the beginning of the episode, so I can tell you. When Glenn was killed by Negan in the first episode of season 7, I was in total shock, and I'm not the only one, of course. I was mad, I was devastated, and I even had to take a break in the show, although the new season had just started. Really, it took some time to recover from it. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about my admiration for Glenn in this episode, but instead I decided to focus on some of the villains of the show. Negan, I see you. And I did wonder about one thing in particular. What about the villains pre-apocalypse? Like, who were they? What did they do? And also, what happened to them at the beginning of the zombie outbreak? Who were they with? Where did they go? In what way did the zombie apocalypse change them? Or not? I think that's a really interesting question here. See, Daryl, for example, so he's not a villain, but let's just take him as an example. He went from an employed outcast to this super survivor who actually has an impact on the community, and people rely on him. And I'm also thinking of Carol, who, remember, she was a battered housewife and she turned into this strong, independent female figure during the apocalypse. Now, let's talk about the show's antagonists. First, the governor. Not my favorite villain, but a major one, you will agree. So, the governor appears for the first time in the 3rd episode of season 3, and let me tell you, I knew straight away that we were going to be in trouble here. The governor is the leader of the fortified town of Woodbury, and he just knows how to make his men obey him and convince people, whether it's by word or force. However, the inhabitants who trust him don't know much about him and his dark secrets. Remember, he was keeping his zombified daughter, and he was even collecting zombified heads in a fish tank. That is such a weird thing to do. But who was the governor before? And what happened to him at the very start of the outbreak? Well, the governor didn't exist pre-apocalypse, in fact. The governor was Mr. Philip Blake, and he actually revealed his real name to Andrea in episode 4 of season 3. So, Philip Blake was born in the 1960s and he was raised in Meriwether County, Georgia. Meriwether County really exists and is southwest of Atlanta. He had a brother and they had a difficult childhood and quite a strained relationship with their father. You see, their father was physically and emotionally abusive toward them, and that left a strong impact on Philip. His dad would show him no mercy at all, and because of him, young Philip lost confidence in himself. But despite his tough childhood, Philip became a family man. So he married, he had a daughter and a dog, so I guess the typical family. I also found out that however, he gradually became dissatisfied with his boring life and especially his professional life. He was a middle management employee working in an office, and he was harassed by his boss, who was younger than him. Also, it must be said that a year before the outbreak, his wife tragically died in a car crash, and you can imagine how devastated he must have been after that. So, after the death of his wife, he became closer to his daughter and more protective. Then, you know the story, the zombie outbreak happened, and Philippe, his daughter, and other survivors barricaded themselves in an apartment for a short period of time. And they left and met other survivors, including Milton Mamet and, the Woodbury scientist, but also Martinez, who used to be a coach. So they would discover Woodbury and make sure it was safe. So we don't know when his daughter Penny died or whether it was from a zombie bite or she fell ill and died, but it was definitely a second blow on Philip. He just couldn't kill zombified Penny, which I understand, so he decided to keep her in his closet, and nobody was aware of that. But this definitely made him a stronger person, a crazy one too, and like more deranged. I think that Philip Blake was just a normal guy who, along with this zombie apocalypse, turned into a true maniac and this charismatic and authoritarian figure that survivors would actually look up to and respect. I also think that his story arc in The Working Day was quite interesting, as he was the first, major villain in the show. If we don't take the zombies into account, of course. If you wish to comment on this episode, I would like to know your opinion about the governor. What did you think of him? Now let's talk about the second major antagonist of the show, Negan. Negan appears for the first time in the last episode of season 6 of The Walking Dead and was one of the most awaited villains of the show, and quite controversial too. He was the leader of the Saviors up until their failed attack on Rick's group in Wrath, episode 16 of season 8. You must remember that episode, right? Negan did horrible things, and I was very curious to find out who he was before the zombie outbreak. Actually, there's an entire episode dedicated to him pre-apocalypse, and this is one of my favorite episodes, as you really get to see another side of him. The backstory of Lucille, the baseball bat, and just the premises of how Negan became the Negan. Negan's full name is Negan Smith, and he used to be a gym teacher, actually. He is from the state of Virginia, and it's said that as a kid, he would bring stray dogs to his house. However, one day, after bringing back a very bad dog, it would kill all the other dogs that he had adopted. And when his mom tried to intervene, the dog would bite her and she would lose half of her hair as a consequence. I didn't find anything about his dad, but I found out that later in high school, Negan became a bully, and like every bully, he would enjoy humiliating people and felt powerful, and just enjoying playing mind games with people. But as an adult, he became a high school PE teacher and he would guide and help his students become stronger. So I don't know about his methods, but he would probably use bullying as well. As far as his love life is concerned, Negan met a woman named Lucille and they later married. Negan was later arrested by the police after a fight in a bar, and he lost his job because the person he fought with was a parent from the high school. And as a consequence, he got depressed and would spend his days on his sofa and playing video games, and he would even cheat on his wife with her best friend. Just before the outbreak, Lucille revealed that she had cancer, and then, it all started. Together, they took shelter in the basement, and they had an external generator. And Negan started to scavenge outside for chemotherapy and even learn how to give it to Lucille. And this is really important here because that's how he's going to become the Negan we know. So from time to time, their doctors would come and give supplies, but after a few months, their generator would attract workers and he would turn it off, and the chemo would get ruined. So Negan went out again and tried to find the doctors for chemo supplies. He finally found the caravan and tried to rob them, and that's when Laura came into the scene. You know Laura, who was a savior lieutenant, and she just knocked him out with a baseball bat. Yes, the baseball bat. And they would eventually give him the supplies he needed and let him go, with the supplies and the baseball bat. However, on his way home, he was captured by a gang who wanted him to reveal where he got all these and the doctor's location. And after being tortured, he finally revealed it and was released. But when he came back, Lucille had committed suicide, and he couldn't put zombified Lucille down, so he just put the house on fire, and that's when he also put barbed wire around his baseball bat. Negan then returned to the gang's headquarters and killed them all, as if that was the easiest thing to do. But I completely understand. He was just mad because he had been captured by these people and Lucy had died in between. He finally reunited with the doctor and Laura and named his baseball bat Lucille after his late wife. I have this love-hate relationship with Negan. I think he is this super charismatic leader and he makes me laugh sometimes, but come on, he killed Glenn and Abraham, so I still hold a grudge against him. Anyway, we must say that he is definitely one of the best villains on the show, along with another character, Alpha. What an amazing character, really. So Alpha first appears in episode 9 of season 9, and she's the leader of the Whisperers. You remember the Whisperers, right? We can't forget them. It's a nomadic group of survivors who, they disguise themselves with the skin of workers to just blend in with them and just wander. They're like a cult and living like animals and very hostile to other survivors. There is an episode dedicated to Alpha in the spin-off Tales of the Walking Dead, and you should definitely watch it if you haven't. It takes place between the start of the outbreak and the first meeting with Beta, and it tells us how she first came across the group of the Whisperers, so that's a very interesting one. Alpha is my favorite villain on The Walking Dead, and the actress Samantha Martin is just amazing, and she is amazing in every role she plays, actually. Alpha, he is very manipulative and did awful things, but I just couldn't hate her. There's just something about her. In this episode of Tales of the Walking Dead, we learned that she apparently killed the father at age 9. Well, at least that's what she says. And by the way, Alpha's real name is Dee for Deborah. We don't know much about her childhood or what she did before the apocalypse, just that she had a daughter named Lydia and a husband named Frank. And in the early stages of the zombie outbreak, Dee, Frank, and Lydia were hiding in a basement in Baltimore, along with several other survivors. After a month or so in the basement, the group of survivors noticed that the outside of the building started to be, overrun by the workers. And one survivor of the group, he experienced a panic attack and just wanted to leave. And because he was getting crazy and making so much noise, Dee killed him, otherwise it would have attracted the zombies. I guess it was just survival instinct and Dee just wanted to live and protect her family. However, what they didn't know at the time, it was whatever the cause of your death, you come back as a zombie, and that survivor actually reanimated. Obviously, he started to attack the group, and as a result, panic in the basement. And Dee tried to escape and get her family to safety, but when Frank tried to save their friends, that's when Dee decided to kill him. At some point after their escape, Dee and Lydia stayed on the steamboat with a community of other survivors. So That's in the episode of Tales of the Walking Dead. And this community was led by a woman named Brooke, and Brooke enjoyed, living as if the world had continued on as normal, which is completely different from Dee, who was more realistic of what was happening around them. And one day, a few of the survivors attempted to seize the steamboat for themselves. Dee saved Brooke and escaped with Lydia, but everybody else was killed. And you should remember that Brooke and Dee were not the best of friends, and because Dee was upset about what had just happened on the boat, she scarred Brooke's face as a sign of revenge. She would eventually let her go, but after the steamboat fiasco, she came across the Whisperers, who at this point were led by a woman named Hera. And the group actually showed them how they could survive using workers' masks. So later, after encountering the Whisperers, Dee and her daughter Lydia found Beta in an abandoned hospital. Guys, let's stop there just a few seconds, please. We need to talk about Beta or Beta, I don't know how to pronounce it, because the two are just linked forever and I can't talk about one and not mention the other. He was a famous country musician known as Half Moon before the outbreak, and when it happened, he took refuge in that abandoned hospital with his best friend. However, the best friend was beaten and came back as a zombie, of course, and Beta couldn't kill him and got ballistic, like he let his zombified friend just wander in the hospital. So then Dee and Lydia arrived at the hospital and Beta would be at first reluctant, After Dee killed the zombified friend, he got mad again, but she finally managed to convince him to join them and suggested he skin his best friend's face off and wear it. At the end of the Tales of the Walking Dead episode, we find out that Dee later murdered Hera, the first leader of the Whisperers, and that she turned her face into a worker mask, and that's when she actually became Alpha, the new leader of the Whisperers. So many groups were presented in The Walking Dead, but I think that the Whisperers were the ones that had the most impact on me as a group, Not even the Saviors. And even if they killed off many loved characters from the show, I just can't hate them. And I really love their story arc too. So now, big question. Who's your favorite villain in The Walking Dead? This episode is coming to an end, just like The Walking Dead. But I'm glad that spin-offs are actually being filmed right now, and I just can't wait to watch them and see how it turns out for Rick, Michonne, Maggie, Negan, and Daryl. And I guess the franchise will never die. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to episode 4 of I Wonder About Things. If you liked it and want to support me, I would highly suggest you hit the subscribe button so you can listen to the podcast anywhere, anytime, and not miss any notifications. See you next Wednesday and have a wonderful day. Goodbye!